Joel Klatt joins us now, Fox lead college football analyst. Do you think there's actually a best of version of this show, or based on my past history, do you question whether there's any good radio I've ever done, Joel?
Well, as long as there's like significant amount of buck, I'm sure you sprinkled in something along the lines, like some sort of quip or joke, but buck would likely be the large contingent of the best of.
Yes. I appreciate you being such a fan. You
Yeah.
I don't know if you're still
By
in
the
California.
way, before we get started on college football, can I just give your audience, which is, by the way, significant. So congratulations to you, because you
the
guys
largest
are
anywhere in
killing it.
radio, humbly. Yes, but yes.
By
What
the
would
way,
you
you
like
can't say
to
those
tell
two
the
things.
audience?
You can't say, "Oh, largest ever," and then humbly. But that's fine. I know your personality, so I get it. So, do you want to talk about like 11 years ago, the conversation that you and I had in the avocado room at Fox Sports?
Yeah, you tell the people, because I've talked about my political evolution, but you and I, for people who don't know, Joel is, and I hate to give him a compliment, but the best person at calling college football games, I think, in the country right now. He will be calling for all of you that are not huge college football fans, because Joel, Buck had never been to a college football game in his entire life. He grew up in New York City until I took him to Ole Miss, Alabama. And can you imagine his cultural experience? Like, you played quarterback in college football. You're well versed in how awesome college football is. Buck had never been to a game, had no idea college football even existed as a big social event.
I'm sure his mind was blown.
Totally.
Like, completely blown, because it's the furthest thing from professional sports. Professional sports, hey, they're great, but they're very corporate, corporate. And you go to a college football game, and it is the most tribal, like, unique and organic type of sporting event that you could find, certainly in this country. And I think that from what I understand, it rivals kind of like Premier League soccer style tribalism. So
yes,
yeah, I bet that was incredible.
No, he was blown away. He was like, I had no idea that this entire subculture existed, or, Joel, that everybody at the Alabama Ole Miss game loved him and agreed with almost everything he said. So he's in New York City, voting for Donald Trump, and people are just like, I hate you, like, go to hell. What are you doing in that red MAGA hat? And then he's down in Tuscaloosa, and people are like, hey, do you want a drink? Pretty girls. He was single at the time, walking around in sundresses, like, everywhere. Everybody's happy, joyful. And he's like, this is kind of amazing. Weather's perfect. He's like, this is unbelievable. But that's background for Buck.
This is
I thought you should know.
right? So this is where Clay and I met, is we were doing a college football show on Fox Sports about 11 years ago when Fox Sports 1 first started, and Clay would fly out and we'd do a Saturday morning show. So we got to sit and watch college football in what we call the avocado room, or like a normal green room. And so I'm getting to know Clay, and he's getting to know me, and you and I immediately, click on college football, and you're a contrarian. So we would argue about college football. And then all of a sudden one day, we start getting into like social aspects and cultural aspects, and then politics. And you were just dyed in the wool. You were like, oh, yeah, I'm a Democrat. And then you were explaining all your positions. And I was like, hey, Clay, like, no, you're not. You're a Republican. And you were like, I am not a Republican. There is no way. I worked for Al Gore. And you shouted at me like 3 times, I worked for Al Gore. And I remember telling you at the time, I was like, Clay, you're a conservative. You just don't even know it yet. And then here we are. And so now every time I see you, I just have a little bit of a smirk that I feel like I was a small part in your red pill.
I mean, in all honesty, in 2013, when you and I started doing college football together at Fox, the country hadn't gone totally and completely insane. And I know you got three boys yourself too, but like, it's crazy. I started off the show talking about, for instance, the evolution of, there's a lot of people out there that are listening to us right now, Joel, that are black, white, Asian, and Hispanic, that voted for Barack Obama, that were thinking like me, hey, I'm a Democrat. And then one day you look around and people are like, hey, if you're a dude who wants to say that you're a girl, you should be able to win a women's championship. And you're like, what? And you have to believe that in order to vote Democrat? Like, it's kind of crazy what the proxy became, right? It went from, hey, what do you think the tax rate should be, to, hey, if you say you're a different sex than you actually are, I have to acknowledge, believe it, and actually award you a women's sports championship to be a Democrat in good standing. And some people are just like, yeah, that's a bridge way too far.
Well, clearly, and yeah, that's wild. So that's how Clay and I became friends, and it started with college football, and and has evolved now outside of college football. I'm incredibly proud of you, buddy. I know that I choke on that a little bit, but I am. You're doing a great job.
Let me ask you this, by the way. Buck makes fun of me, but you mentioned that we became friends initially because we're both big college football fans. I naturally trust college football fans, regardless of what team they root for, even Alabama fans, more than I do people who are not college football fans. I bet with what you do, you also have that same feeling, because there is some sort of innate foundational connection there, even if you root for different teams. I think that is more substantial than just college football fandom. Do you feel that same way?
Okay, so I'll probably get myself in trouble for saying it this way, but whatever, it's your show. So I think that college football is one of the most American things in our sporting world. It is totally and almost completely void of the political influence that we've seen in professional sports. And I think, having been around it my whole life, there's a purity to college football that maybe doesn't exist in other arenas of sport. And so because of that, when I see or hear from or talk with or converse with people in our sport, around our sport, that love our sport, I know that there is a genuine love of that, and not some sort of ulterior motive, if that makes sense. And I think that's what I've kind of boiled it down to. I know you say it from a trust factor, but there's a love of our sport that is just deeper than anything else, and there's no other avenue that I feel like people are trying to get there. And also, if you tell me like, well, I'm not a fan of college football, well, then I assume that you're just like an academic, and I don't trust academics at all.
We're talking to Joel Klatt. Let me also dive into this with you, because I don't think we talked about it much publicly, but you and I fought super hard, and you did it publicly, which was actually rare for people in sports media, to have seasons played in sports during COVID.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was so important? And looking back on it now, 4 years later, hey, by the way, you and I and everybody who fought and said we can do this safely were 100% right. And it's amazing, all those people who said we couldn't do it, they just pretend that argument never happened, right?
Yeah, it wasn't about football. It was about freedom. And it was about the idea that something could be told to us that didn't have to be proven. And in many ways, the way it was communicated to us was false and under false pretense. And yet we had to sit there and just take it because. That's why I pushed. It wasn't specifically for football or anything else. I was pushing for, I know this sounds so stupid, but for freedom, Clay. Yeah. And for me, this idea that we were just going to, with limited knowledge, give up was something I was not willing to do. My dad fought in Vietnam. I knew the importance of college football. I knew the importance of maintaining social perspective in terms of trying to achieve a goal. I knew how important college football was to the individuals playing it. I knew how important college football was to the fans that wanted to see it, to the other sports. You see, here's the thing that people don't understand. It's not just a college football game.
Yep. That
college football game is supporting every single athlete at that university and within that conference. So every opportunity given in an athletic endeavor in college athletics is provided by college football. And if we just decided that we were going to forego that, we were impacting thousands of people that aren't even involved in the sport. And for all of those reasons, I was completely unwilling to be silent.
And I'm glad you weren't, and we won, and the season was played, and it ended up a tremendous success. You are going to be in Columbus, Ohio this weekend calling Michigan, Ohio State. It's going to be one of the most watched regular season games of the year. For people who have never watched the big game, why should they check it out? And for people that are fired up to watch it, what do you expect to see?
So this is the greatest rivalry that we have in American sports. All due respect to everything else, professional sports doesn't touch this, and even in college football, even though you think Tennessee, Florida is some sort of great rivalry, it's not. Not compared to Ohio State, Michigan. This thing is like it goes so deep, and the traditions at both of these schools. And what makes this iteration so interesting to me is that Ohio State, which had owned the rivalry for the better part of about 20 years, they've gotten beat 3 straight years by Michigan. Michigan won the national championship, and so there is this like deep hatred between these schools, and this idea that Ohio State, even as successful as they are, they're the number 2 team ranked in the country. They're 10-1, and even though Michigan's not had a great season, there's this idea that nothing will make the season a success unless they're able to beat Michigan. They have to do it. And from that standpoint, it's just incredibly interesting. I expect Ohio State will play really well. They're one of the best teams in the country, and Michigan would like nothing more than to ruin the Buckeyes season because of the hatred that goes way back into the 1960s between Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. So these are things that are so fascinating to me. And then you've got all the aspects of the college football playoff. Those of you listeners that are not super college football fans, here's the deal. The college football playoff has expanded. It's gone to 12 teams, and there's been more interest now in our sport than ever before. So, for instance, a team like Tennessee, Clay's team, is like firmly in the playoff, and everything broke for them last week. A team like Indiana, which has the most losses in college football history, they get a new head coach this year. He brings in transfers, and now they're 10-1 and firmly, in my eyes, inside of the college football line. So our sport's never been better. A team like Indiana can get back into the mix of things. Tennessee is in the mix of things. And from that standpoint, this week is going to be very fun.
Tonight is last question for you, and I'd encourage you guys to go follow Joel Klatt at Joel Klatt on Twitter. You can tell him thanks for coming on the program here, and maybe you give him tips for Big Ten towns because he goes everywhere now to call games, in particular in the Big Ten. What do you think is controversial in terms of the playoff committee tonight? Do you think SMU is in? Do you think Miami? Does the ACC get 2? You said you think Indiana, Tennessee are comfortably in. Where's that bubble? Who are the teams inside and outside that you think people need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about Indiana because they haven't played necessarily a great schedule. But now after playing Ohio State last week, they lost that game. But now their strength of schedule is significantly better than what it was prior. So if you compare them to, like, let's say a Miami or an SMU or even a team like, let's say Notre Dame, their strength of schedule stacks up more favorably, and their loss is much better than those other teams' loss. So Indiana, I think on the outside, the narrative is that they would be on the bubble. I don't think that they will be, nor should be. They're going to be firmly in. The teams that I'm looking at from a bubble perspective are teams like SMU, Clemson, who's all of a sudden, after some early struggles, back in the mix of things. And then the biggest question I'm going to have is where do they put these 3-loss SEC teams like Alabama and Ole Miss? How far do they drop them down after they took bad losses last weekend? Because that'll tell us everything we need to know about the number of teams the SEC gets in. And I can tell you this, because, Clay, you're one of them. Those SEC fans have been thinking to themselves the whole time they're going to get 4 or 5 teams in, and right now it looks like maybe their max is 3.
No doubt. Joel, have fun. Tell your family Happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate
Same
the
to you,
time, and we'll talk to you again.
Yeah, always great to chat with you. Proud of you, man. You're doing great.
Same to be said for you. Again, I encourage you guys, go follow at Joel Klatt. Let him know you appreciate him coming on. Sometimes you guys ask, like, and I've said this before on the program, but what's something you can do to grow the show? If you're on social media and you enjoy a guest, we don't pay anybody. Nobody's getting paid to come on this program at any point. They're doing it because they want to come talk with you guys. Reach out, social media, agree, disagree with whatever they say, but let them know that you appreciate being able to hear them on the program, regardless of who they may be. I got to tell you, Thanksgiving's coming up. How many of you out there have great Thanksgiving memories with your friends and family? How many of you had old VHS tapes back in the day that aren't preserved? That VHS tape is not designed to last for a long time. Those old camcorders, how many of you even have VCRs anymore? Legacy Box can digitize all those old family memories and make it easy to share, really easy to share for you on a digitized basis. Right now, you can get hooked up with 65% off their regular prices. Again, Black Friday special, legacybox.com/Clay, 65% off right now. That's legacybox.com/Clay. They got 200 people hooking you up, 20 different types of old media they can convert to digital. Legacybox.com/Clay.